Love finances the other F word and want to support the show? Become a patron by going to patreon.com/FTOFW. You'll get special features, a shout out on the air, and early releases. Or if you prefer, pick up some merchandise at financestheotherfword.com.
As fantastic a CFP as Mel O is, and as wonderful an attorney as I am, please do note that anything said in our show are our opinions alone and are not meant to be taken as financial or legal advice.
Welcome to Finances, the Other F Word, a Gen Xer podcast for musicians and music lovers, where we discuss money and music without all the pretentious bullshit. Here are your hosts, Zoe Terry, attorney at large, and Mel O, certified financial planner and author of Finances, the Other F Word. Listener discretion is advised.
Got it. Okay. Holy shit. I hope that works. Okay. So for you guys, for this episode, first of all, welcome to Finances, the Other F Word. And we are streaming live to multiple platforms right now. And I cannot tell you guys the fucking difficulty it is to try to make that happen. So I really hope to God that I've done everything I was supposed to do. And I'm checking off my little list and we'll just see. And hopefully everything will be captured. If not, this will be a audio only. But today we are talking about the sanctions on Russia. And this is the deal, you guys. Everybody is hearing, so-and-so country put this sanction on Russia and so-and-so country put this sanction on Russia. But a lot of people don't know what sanctions are, what they do, how they can affect not only the country that is the target, but also the country that is doing the targeting. And so we're going to talk a little bit about some of the sanctions that the United States has put on Russia and some of the other countries globally and what they have done. And then I'm going to kick it over to Zoe and she's going to talk about specifically what the UK has done. And then we're going to round this out with a little bit about the Russian stock market. And all of this is going to have an effect on us here in the United States. And you're going to see why here in a moment. And I'm still getting over COVID. So please forgive my cough intermittent. I can't do anything about it, y'all. It's just going to happen, just so you know. Also, if you guys have any questions and you're trying to do chat, I'm not going to be able to see any of it because the way that we have to do this today. So if you guys have any issues or questions, you can hit us up at 775-537-4352 and give us any type of, feedback or questions that you might have. So let's get right into this delightfulness that is sanctioned. So unless you've been living under a rock, you guys are very familiar with the fact that Ukraine has obviously been invaded by Russia. And because of that, we have seen sanctions that are designed for economic punishment be weaponized in a very swift, very global kind of network of being very aggressive, trying to go after Putin. And so basically, when we're sitting here and we're talking about this, we're literally just trying to do the best we can, as well as other countries, without getting into a blatant nuclear war or potential nuclear war with a nuclear power. So my 80s babies, you guys will probably remember that was our entire 80s. Was that for you guys over there too?
Oh yeah, that was my biggest fear was nuclear war and the Bermuda Triangle.
Bermuda Triangle is kind of creepy. You guys should, there's documentaries on it. I would not go through it. I don't need to know that. But yeah, so if you were an Xer and you were an 80s baby, you lived in eternal fear of nuclear war constantly. And I remember that for us, our drill was if there was a nuclear war, you were supposed to get under your desk, which is fucking stupid.
That's going to make all the difference.
Absolutely. This desk is going to be so strong that it's going to fucking withstand a nuclear war. I mean, it was ridiculous. And also, just before we get into these sanctions, for those of you who didn't come up in the 80s and you want to know a little bit of what the taste of the Cold War originally was like, you guys can watch The Day After, which is a horrible video. Did you guys have that in Britain?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, God. So it was a show about what happens the day after a nuclear bomb. And it was as exciting and refreshing as you can imagine. So anyway, so I never thought in my lifetime I would be faced with another potential of nuclear war, but here we are And, for Xers, this is old hat. So let's talk a little bit about what sanctions are. Sanctions are economic penalties against a country, its officials, its private citizens sometimes. They are also designed to punish to get a certain desired outcome, a target, or an action. And so there's a couple different types of sanctions that are used, and we're going to talk about them a lot because a lot of them have been actually employed to deal with the Ukraine invasion. So types of sanctions are travel bans, export restrictions. So if we're sending stuff out to a country, we can restrict what we send out. We're going to circle back that here in a second. Trade embargoes, where basically we just completely cut off trading with a country for a specific good or service, and we just completely do it. The other one is asset seizures. And this is basically, they're calling this, they're targeting asset seizures or targeting the kleptocracy.
Do you mean kleptocracy?
There you go. There's an O in there that I forgot. That's where I got my grammar Nazi here. And so kleptocracy, I cannot speak. I blame the education system in the South. I don't give a shit. Is basically what they're calling people who make money off the backs of other people that they govern. So when we're talking about Putin, we're talking about the oligarchs, which if you guys are familiar with them, they are the millionaires and billionaires of Russia who are in Putin's inner circle, who are a part of the governing body. And so with the kleptocracy, woo, look at that shit.
Oh, yeah.
Fuck yeah, it took me 4 times, but I did that shit.
Yeah.
I owned it.
In her 40s, she can now speak.
Yeah, look at that shit. I made it my bitch. So with the kleptocracy, what they're doing is they're going after and they're seizing assets based on civil and criminal law of the people who are either working out of Russia or maybe from Russia that have assets held over in the United States. But there's also doing the same thing as happening in other countries in the globe. And like I said, this is United Front. We're going to talk about that here in a minute. They when they take the asset seizures, they basically take it and now it's theirs and that's it, and you're done. And they also do asset seizures if they find that you have done any crimes that impact the US financial system. And so these could be things like money laundering, where you're taking dirty money and you're running it through a business, a legitimate business, to clean it. That's why it's called money laundering, sanctions evasion, or foreign bribes of any kind. And again, economic sanctions are used as the last ditch effort before we put troops on the ground, before we go into actual conflict. And of course, being that this would involve Russia, and if he attacked NATO forces, then we would be looking at World War III, which I never thought I would ever have to worry about in my lifetime. But here we are. So let's talk about the United States first, the sanctions that the United States has done. So they have placed restrictions immediate. One of the first things they did was they placed restrictions on Donetsk and Luhansk, which are the 2 territories that Putin recognized as being independent. And so immediately what happened is that the US government went ahead and they limited the financial transactions between those territories and the United States. Now, a lot of these sanctions were put in place by executive order from the Biden administration. The one that was just released today at the time of this recording, we're recording this on 2 days before you guys will hear it on Tuesday, was also done from an executive order. We'll touch on that here in a minute. And what they did was they took those 2 territories and they said, we're going to limit your financial transaction ability with the United States. Now, all of these sanctions, as we go through for you guys to understand, we're in a global marketplace. That's why the shit we do to Russia is going to affect them, but the shit we do to Russia can also affect us, right? So it's all kind of fucked up. The US has also blocked assets from major financial institutions owned by people operating in Russia. And also they have done the same for private financial institutions. So there's public financial institutions and there are private financial institutions, and they've blocked all of them. The United States has also targeted CEOs of major financial institutions and their kids, blocking their kids' asset, as well as targeting other Russian political figures. Now, the US has teamed up with NATO, with the NATO countries, and they've created a task force where they've united together to go hunt and find other assets that the oligarchs and Putin and people of Russia, businessmen, the upper class of Russia, where they have assets stored globally, they have created a task force to go hunt these assets down and freeze them. And this is why I tell you at the very beginning of this, that this is the first time that we've seen so many sanctions come through, that they have been globalized and that they have been moved as like a weapon. And it's crazy the amount of how fast this has happened. And we'll get into some of the things that has resulted in that. The United States has also targeted Belarus. So Belarus is the territory that Russia came through to have access to Ukraine. And so the US has targeted Belarus to try to pressure them to, I guess, resist the Russians or get them out. And they have blocked assets and limited trading, and then also limited financial transactions to the US. So Belarus also has sanctions on it. Now, the United States has also cut access. So US consumers, you as a US citizen, you can own stock in Russia. Okay. You can own sovereign debt out of Russia, which we're going to talk about here in a little bit. So what the United States has done is they've come in and they said, hey, look, we're going to limit the trading you can do on these. So basically you might have something held in Russia, but we're going to limit so you can't sell it. But what we're going to find here in a minute is that the Russian stock exchange has been closed. So even if you want to sell it, you can't fucking sell it. But the point is that the United States has said, nope, we're going to limit the trading on it. And what that does is that makes it more desirable, because the whole point of the stock market is you get a buyer and a seller. So if you're trying to sell, but you can't sell, then that completely takes the equation and flips it on its head. What they've also done, and is as a result of this, is that they're trying to limit United States citizens' ability to buy sovereign debt from Russia. So we've talked about this on prior shows. When the United States issues a US Treasury, you are buying it and you are in part funding the government. And, you've heard, like, during World War II, there was war bonds, right? And so what's happening is that Russia needs to finance their war or finance their attack on the Ukraine. So the United States has stepped in to limit those types of transactions, because they do not want Russia to have any type of foothold where they can issue Russian government debt and that the Americans will buy, thus trying to stop them from funding their campaign for war. Currently, as of the time of this recording, because sanctions seem to be coming out every day, the only thing that can still be actively traded is debt from Russia that is less than 30 days. So basically no long-term funding of debt. And that is something that, we've seen come online very quickly and very aggressively. Now, there's a couple things with these sanctions that it's not just the financial industry is a huge part of it, because we are more connected financially now than, say, we were in World War II. But there's also sanctions that are hitting the sectors of the gas sector out of Russia, which we're going to talk about in a minute, maritime, like boat transportation of goods, mining, oil, pipelines, railroads, telecommunication, and the airline sector. So all of these sectors are kind of getting slammed all at once by the United States, by other countries, and they're really trying to take down Russia and stop this conflict. Even though I don't know, with Putin, I don't know if that's going to stop him. And we'll talk about that a little bit when we end the show, about some of the dangers of doing the sanctions, even though my opinion is that they are needed. What is your opinions on the sanctions?
Oh, I think they're totally needed. Yep.
Yeah. And they're going to be a little uncomfortable for us. So let's keep talking. Russia provides approximately 40% of Europe's natural gas. I can't talk today. So on the Eastern Hemisphere, they're, of course, obviously a little bit more dependent on the commodities that come out of Russia. We've talked about commodities before. That's a commodity is something that wherever you buy it, it's the same thing. Carrots, lettuce, oil, that type of thing. And so Russia is a big exporter of commodities. Okay. They are part of the BRIC countries, which is Brazil, Russia, India, China, and they are heavy exporters. And so they export out 40% of Europe's natural gas. I don't know why I keep natural gas. National gas sounds kind of cooler though, more patriotic. So the U.S. has cut off from Russia access to lending from financial institutions. So banks over here in America, would lend to Russian companies as part of a normal business, but now they have cut that off as well. So there is no lending coming from financial institutions outside of the United States. And we talked about Russia and how big of a commodity exporter it is. And so just so you guys understand, when we're talking about how much oil comes out of Russia, it is the largest oil exporter, representing 7% of the total global outlay of oil. Now, I know 7% of something doesn't sound that big until you realize that 93% of that is all made up from a whole bunch of other countries trying to close that gap. So we're talking about a major exporter of oil, which is Russia. And just as of today, the Biden administration, by executive order, even though Congress was going to vote on it on Wednesday, Biden put through an executive order just this morning on Tuesday, where the United States has officially banned purchasing oil from Russia. And I'm going to tell you why this is a big fucking deal. The UK, in tandem, has also stopped, saying that they are going to stop buying oil from Russia. However, they are going to continue to import coal and natural gas from Russia because, again, when we're talking about the Eastern Hemisphere, they are more dependent on the resources coming out of Russia. So that's the best that the UK can do. And so what does that mean? Well, that means that we're going to see obviously higher gas prices. And this is one of the reasons why this sanction that just was released today at the time of this recording is such a big fucking deal, because of the fact that that was one of the things that the Biden administration did not want to do, because we are in a high inflation environment. And now with the sanctions that are on Russia, OPEC has said that they are going to try to offset the supply. But with that, we're going to have a supply and demand out of whack. And so we are going to see that the gas prices are going to get even higher. And as of this morning, at parts in California, a gallon of gasoline is $9.
Wow.
Which is the highest I've ever seen. And in the 70s, there was a massive gas shortage in this country. We haven't covered it. I don't know how expensive it was, but I don't think it was $9 a gallon, but that would be something interesting to check on. Before this sanction this morning was released, we saw over in the European countries and the EU, the European Union, that natural gas went 60% higher in cost. Like it literally went from, I'm here and then Ukraine and all this bullshit happens and bam, 60% higher. It shot up because it did expect that there was going to be issues between, Russia and Ukraine, causing supply shortages coming out of Russia. So everybody's going to be feeling the pinch on this. Now, Russia, before the sanctions that were announced this morning, Russia was actively trying to sell oil to people, and they were discounting it because we have a supply and demand issue. Now we see that oil is shooting up because the presumption is there's going to be less oil, which means that the oils that's out there is more expensive. But what happened is Russia was trying to sell the oil that they had at an extreme discount, and there was no buyers, with the exception of one country who is not specifically buying oil, but is doing it just the same. And we'll talk about them in a second. And I'll give you one guess. They're also communist. So, and they're also right there near Russia. So we'll talk about them. And so there's been no takers. And the thing is that since Russia is such a big exporter of commodities, this is where they're trying to hit them in the junk, right? Because they're trying to cut off the mainstreams into that country. Besides just making everything more fucking difficult for them to transact business on a global scale, they're also trying to just punch them in the nuts and make it so that they can't, have these larger revenue streams coming in. The U.S. has also blocked access to reserves that Russia has with the United States. And this has put the Russian ruble into free fall. And so just so you guys get an understanding of what I'm talking about, currently, as of the time of this recording, one Russian ruble is less than a cent. and America, which is fucking ridiculous. Now, currently right now, in about 7 hours from now, the currency exchanges out of Moscow are going to reopen and the ruble will begin trading. And we'll have to see what's going to happen with that. We're going to get back to that a little bit here in a minute. There has been talks of removing Russia from SWIFT. So far, they've removed 7 banks from the SWIFT financial network. And all SWIFT is it's a network of banks, 10,000 banks that have all gotten together, and they put processes in place where they can transact financial payments quicker and faster. Now, if in the event that Russia is totally banned from the SWIFT program, they can still transact business. It's just going to be annoying as fuck. And there's also still 11,000 other banks that are not in SWIFT that they can go ahead and they can process payments and things too. The United States, on top of that, has limited trade with Russia as far as exporting out technology parts and aero defense parts and automobile parts. And the hopes of all of this is, of course, to cripple Russia so that if shit breaks down over there, then they don't have anything they can't fix it. Now, we see a couple other countries. Japan has announced that they have put export controls out to Belarus. And again, because everybody's trying to target whoever they can over there, Japan has also frozen the assets of Belarus President Alexander Lukashenko. And that's probably wrong, but close enough. No, it's right. Zoe's giving me the seal of approval, so that's good. And other high-ranking government officials on top of that. What we see that Canada has canceled export permits. So for the countries for the people in Canada who are exporting out to Russia, they have started revoking their export permits. And they have also limited the technology, the semiconductors that they are sending out to Russia. And the European Union has also blocked access to Putin's assets and other of his senior political advisors. So everybody's just fucking bending him over. And the EU is currently in talks to limit or restrict access to its ports of entry, their water ports of entry to Russian vessels, which means that even if there's shit that's managed goods to get out of Russia, if it starts coming and they can't port and they can't unload it and they can't dock it, that shit's got to go back to Russia. So if the EU does get on board with that, that's going to be a pretty detrimental swipe to it. And the last country I'll touch on before I turn it over to find out what's going on in the UK, China. So China is still basically towing the line with Russia. They have come out and they said that they are extremely concerned, I'm doing air quotes, about the loss of Ukraine citizens' lives, and that they wish that there would be no war, but they have not sanctioned them. And it was announced just today. This is why I'm saying things are happening all the time. It was just announced today that China's government is looking at picking up a big ownership in Russian oil companies. And if you're an investor, I mean, which I think is fucking shitty, but let's be real about it. China is communist. Russia is communist. China sees a great deal where they can have ownership in a country and companies that have that they are heavily reliant on, and they're getting a screaming deal out of it because Russia needs money. But by doing that, some could argue, and I will argue, that China is going to help, if that happens, finance the invasion of Ukraine. And the thing that's so crazy is that China has deep economic ties to Ukraine. And so the fact that they would do that seems a little backwards. And then we're going to talk about some other stuff after Zoe talks about the sanctions and stuff that we're seeing come out of the UK.
Okay, so the main legislation in England that deals with sanctions against Russia is the Russia Sanctions EU Exit Regulations of 2019. And there have been 5 amendments to that statute already in March. But the UK is pushing through new legislation this week, it may have already passed, to tighten these restrictions even further on Russian businesses and wealthy individuals. So the legislation they're trying to push through this week is so that to allow them to pursue Putin's allies in UK with the full backing of the law, and to try and put it in line with the penalties that are being imposed by the EU and the US. They have already sanctioned a lot of individuals, banks and companies, but there've been complaints from both parties in the UK that they're moving too slow. Like I said, they have frozen some assets of individuals and companies with links to Putin, but the arguments are that they're not doing enough quickly enough. And there are a lot of wealthy Putin allies that have that store large sums of money in London, and by any stalling on our part is allowing them time to move that money elsewhere. So the amendments that are being made or may have already been made as we talk are to remove, for example, to remove the appropriateness test, which was needed up until now to when imposing a sanction on individuals. So they're removing that to make it easier to impose sanctions on individuals. They're speeding up the deadlines for overseas companies to declare who their true owners are, from 18 months to 6 months, which, okay, that sounds good, but that's still, some ways off. They're increasing the fines from £500 a day to £2,500 a day. But all of this isn't going to take place until middle of March. And the purpose of those kind of amendments is to help try and prevent money laundering. As I said, they've already imposed sanctions on more than 100 individuals, businesses, banks, whatever. And last week, they added 2 more oligarchs to that list. They were well-known individuals in the UK. Alisher Usmanov, he has links to a well-known football club over there, Everton FC, and also the former Russian deputy PM, Igor Shuvalov. Now, when I say that they've imposed sanctions on them, what I mean by that is that, as Mel pointed out earlier, their assets have been frozen. And in this case, they can't travel to or from the UK. And they also have limits on the amount of money they can keep in a UK bank account, which in this case now is £50,000. So they can't have any more than that. Now, other sanctions that they've already put in place in the UK is that there've been asset freezes on Russian banks, including the VTB, which is Russia's largest bank. They have prohibiting Russian companies from dealing with securities or money market investments that are issued by Russia. That will mean more to you, Mel, than me, but that makes sense to you, right?
Yes.
They're prohibiting anyone in the country from providing loans or credit to Russian individuals, Russian corporations, or Russian banks, Russian government, sorry. There is to be no banking relationships between UK banks and Russian banks. There are export bans on goods that could have military use, including, technology, electronics, computers, lasers, navigation equipment, marine equipment and aerospace equipment, which all make sense. In the UK, they are already preventing Russian ships from entering UK ports, and they're also preventing Russian aircraft from landing in the UK. They are preventing UK insurance. They're preventing Russian companies from being part of the UK insurance market. They are preventing Russian banks from using or having access to UK financial services. And as I mentioned earlier, in respect of the 2 oligarchs that were sanctioned last week, they are limiting the deposits of Russian nationals, in UK banks of 50,000. So any Russian nationals can only hold a maximum of £50,000 in a UK bank account. And there have been similar sanctions on Belarus too, as you just mentioned, in terms of US sanctions. So there have been a number of sanctions already. And as I said, they're pushing through legislations to tighten those sanctions and increase those sanctions, although some people have, as I've said, saying it's a little bit, they've been dragging their feet. I saw something this morning on the news, not just related to UK, but in general, about there's a big fear about cryptocurrency and how Russia is going to try and use that. And there needs to be some kind of sanctions or policing in place of cryptocurrency. I don't know if you have any feelings on that.
Yeah, there was just a headline that I saw, and I read like the first two paragraphs where Biden was looking at that. And if he does that, that's going to open up the door for the Fed to start regulating cryptocurrency over here, which is one of the things that they've been toying with the idea of doing. And also one of the things that I forgot to mention is that the EU is also band together to start taking the passports of the Russian political figures, or not honoring them. I mean, they can't take them, but you know what I'm saying? Like where they either restrict them or they unissue them or whatever, but they're trying to trap them in the country. Now, obviously, all these people have personal planes and they could just fly wherever they want to. And of course, we've heard that there's been air restrictions, over like flying over airspace where it's been restricted. But what they're trying to do is they're literally trying to tell the Russian oligarchs and the political figures, you started it, you fucking stay there and you deal with it. But of course, we know that nothing's going to happen to them because they have all this money. And depending on how much of it was in the ruble, depends on exactly how much they're worth now. And so let's talk a little bit about.
I just want to mention one of the biggest sanctions that has been put in place today. I heard on the news was that McDonald's is temporarily closing all of its restaurants in Russia. So I think the end is nigh, personally.
Yeah. I mean, that's a big deal. But I do love me a fillet of fish. I do. I got to tell you, I don't eat it a lot because it has like 56 carbs, but I fucking love me some fillet of fish. It's supposed to be naturally sourced, and I don't fucking believe that for a minute.
Oh, not for a second.
No.
I'm with you. I like one now and again.
Oh yeah, they're good. So who doesn't like to eat a little fish every once in a while? So I have a friend who is from Russia. Literally, she moved here in August. And I tried to get her to come on the show, and she was terrified, not because she was terrified to come on the show, but because she still has friends and family that are over in Russia. And she is so concerned that anything that she says here, if she is found out, could somehow get and end up hurting her friends and family. So I asked her to tell me a couple of the stories, and I want to share them with you as we close out about what's happening with the Russian stock market. And I know this episode is going to be a little bit long, but this is big fucking deal, guys. This is really important stuff. And I understand that, listening to a podcast that's a little longer about finances might not be something that gets you hard, but you're going to have to fucking do it because this shit is very important. So one of the things she was telling me about was that the people in Russia don't want the war, and that they were protesting with the no war signs. And then they ended up arresting like 2,300 people. So what happened is that people went into their homes and put up signs in their windows that said no war. Well, then the Russian police came to the homes and arrested them out of the homes for having the no war thing. Another thing that she told me, and this is going to become important here in just 1 second, is that, of course, as we've talked about them limiting access to the SWIFT, the SWIFT financial network, if you can manage to get money to somebody that you have over there, a loved one or a family member, the banks are taking 30% off the top before they give you whatever money is coming to you. And this is a lot of stuff that's not being talked about, that she is getting information from, obviously, because she still has friends and family over there. Maybe at some point we'll have her on, but at this time she has declined and said no, but that I was free to use those stories. So let's really talk about very quickly what is happening to the Russian stock market. And then we're going to round out with some parting thoughts, and then we're going to wrap this up for today. So the Russian stock market has been closed since February 25th of 2022. Okay. Now, it was supposed to open today and it didn't. And they said that they're going to open the currency markets. And I think what they're trying to do is just put a toe in the water and open up the currency markets to see what's going to happen when the ruble starts trading. But this is the deal, you guys. That's a big fucking deal. One of the times that I can remember in recent memory when the stock market was closed, it was after 9/11. And I think it was closed for 4 business days, if I'm correct. And when it opened, it went straight in the fucking shitter. Like, bam, like that. We went off a cliff. We immediately went into a bear market. I can't remember if we were in a recession or that took us into recession, but our stock market went off a cliff. This is a long time for a stock market to be closed. We also saw the stock market in Russia close after the fall of Russia, and it took many, many years for it to reopen. So now the stock market was supposed to open today, still has not opened. No time in sight when it's going to open, which means that if you're an investor in Russia and you have stocks on the Moscow exchange, well, guess what? You can't get to any of that. And there was limited trading in London and one other exchange that I can't remember now. But the stocks out of Russia that we're trading were like pennies, because this is a big fucking deal. When you get concerned that somebody's not going to be able to pay you back, then that does not make that security or that investment instrument desirable. So still not open, been closed since February 25th. Their bond ratings have been cut by like overnight by like 6 to 7 ratings. So we've talked about this on the show before, but I'm just going to give you a quick reminder. When you buy a bond, it has a rating. Think of it as a credit score. And there's certain ratings that are considered investment grade, which is good. And then there's certain ratings that are considered non-investment grade, which are bad or considered junk status. And the bonds that are in junk status are ones that they're afraid that the person that issued the bond cannot pay you back or can't make your interest payments. And what we've seen the major bond raters come in and just cut Russian debt from wherever they were before, somewhere in the A's down to probably double B's or maybe double B minuses or whatever the case is. And so what we've seen that just overnight, they have shot up, and they said the chances that they think that the Russian sovereign debt that we just talked about will go into default is at about 65%. And the ruble, like I said, has completely crashed. But what we see though, is we see that, the Russian ruble one ruble is worth less than a penny in American currency. But we're seeing that Ukraine is issuing sovereign debt, and people are picking it up to the tune of about $227 million so far. And it's paying 11% interest. Now, 11% interest is fucking amazing as shit. And the reason why that's so high is because people are also afraid to buy Ukraine bonds, because what happens if Russia actually takes over Ukraine, right? So when you're looking at things that are more risky, you're looking at premiums that happen within a marketplace. And we see just tons of international assistance that's flooding in from, European countries that are giving Ukraine, weapons or giving Ukraine money. And we see a whole bunch of stuff going on. And so the two parting thoughts I have for you guys as you're digesting everything that I just told you is that Russia and Ukraine combined, they account for a huge amount of global agriculture. And again, when we talked about when we do something to one country that we're targeting, there is going to be an effect from us. We stop importing Russian oil, which means our gas prices are going to go up, even though we're targeting Russia to try to cripple them. And so when we're talking about global agricultural, those two countries together export a huge amount of wheat, corn, sunflower oil, as well as a whole bunch of stuff. And those two countries, Ukraine, as small as it is, and Russia, those two countries combined make up more than 1/10 of all the calories traded globally. So when we're talking about sanctions on Russia, you guys, we're talking about stuff that could possibly come back and hit the United States, as it could potentially come back and hit the UK and hit Germany and a whole bunch of other stuff. And then the very last thing that I had read in an article that I just found fascinating, and all the links are in the show, is what can Putin possibly do now to save face? So think about it. Globally, we've just united front. We're going after Putin, going after him. But the thing is that we've done so much stuff to him now, and he seems to be doubling down, like we're familiar with other administrations that have done that. And the thing is that let's say that the sanctions work, and let's say that it completely rocks the Russian economy. 9 times out of 10, the citizens who don't want the war are the ones that are going to be and are being hit the worst, which is sad as fuck. But on top of that, what exit strategy would Putin possibly have? So unless he just says, hey, you guys, I overestimated the situation, and this was probably a stupid move on my part. Hey, sorry, I'm going to go back to Russia. He's going to lose face. And Putin losing face, I just don't see that that's something that he would do. Now, there is a concern of nuclear war. I personally am not too afraid of that, because if he nukes, then we nuke and they nuke and we're all dead anyway. So it's an end game sum. But you know, again, for my 80s babies, we've been there, done this, and we'll see what happens. But how, since everybody has such an aggressive, united front against him, how exactly would Putin be able to back out of this? Even if he stops the invasion of Ukraine, nobody's dropping the sanctions, at least not for a while, because they don't trust them at this point. And so that I really wanted to leave you guys with that, because it's interesting when we're talking about financial markets and we're talking about history and we're talking about sanctions, we're talking about war. It's not like, you know, they just exit and then everything's fine. And so as you're seeing prices go up and you're seeing inflation increase and you're seeing these sanctions, these talking heads telling you about this sanction and that sanction, I want you guys to have a better understanding of that, so you understand how it could possibly affect us as Americans and citizens globally. And that's really all I wanted to cover today. Anything else, Zoe?
Nope.
Okay. So as always, you guys can follow us on Finance is the Other F Word. You can check out our YouTube channel where you will see Zoe and I's lovely face on Finance is the Other F Word. I can't even talk today. I am on TikTok at FTOFW_podcast. And you can follow Lily Lou Mittens on Instagram. And of course, Finance is the Other F Word, another F Word to love. My book is on Amazon, Walmart, Target, and Barnes and Noble. And with that, we are out this bitch.
Cheerio.
Thank you for listening. Please check back for upcoming episodes and follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Finances, the Other F Word.